Today's decision is a win for Canadians and for future generations. It cannot be free to pollute in Canada. This decision confirms that putting a price on carbon pollution and returning the revenues to Canadians through the Climate Action Incentive Rebate is not only constitutional, it is an effective and essential part of any serious response to the global challenge of climate change. The court also recognized, as do most Canadians, that climate change is man-made and one of the great existential issues of our time.
But is that true? That's Catherine McKenna talking about a 3-2 decision at the Saskatchewan court about the constitutionality of her proposed national carbon tax. Well, joining us now via Skype is a man who follows this file closer than most, and in fact was in Ontario as the matter was duked out in that courtroom too. And I'm talking about our friend, Andrew Lawton. Andrew, great to see you again.
Hey, great to be with you, Ezra. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I have not read the dense details of the legal decision in Saskatchewan, but the summary I read said it wasn't really the great victory Catherine McKenna makes it out to be. And in fact, there were certain arguments by the federal government that were rejected by all 5 out of 5 judges. I know you've been paying very close attention to this. What's your takeaway from A, the Saskatchewan court ruling, and B, Catherine McKenna's response to it?
Yeah, so I actually did read the Saskatchewan court ruling, and I also listened to Catherine McKenna, and both are pretty dense, as a matter of fact. And when Catherine McKenna speaks out and says that the court ruled that a carbon tax is an effective means to combat climate change, that proves that she didn't even read to page 2 of the decision. And if I may, I'd like to read paragraph 6 from page 2 of the decision, which says, "The issue is not whether greenhouse gas pricing should or should not be adopted or whether the act is effective or fair." Mm-hmm. So she says that the effectiveness of this carbon tax has been vindicated by the court, when the court said that's not even our problem. We aren't even looking at whether it's effective. And this proves that the government is trying to find some political support from the court instead of dealing with the actual matters at hand in these cases, which was strictly the constitutionality. Now, look, the federal government did win on the constitutionality side, but it was not given the green light to proceed as a matter of policy like Catherine McKenna is trying to pretend.
Yeah, I mean, I just knew when she said the court says this is an existential challenge to Canada. I thought, that can't be right. That's not right. And she's counting on the fact that 99.999% of Canadians will not read an incredibly dense judicial ruling with a very lengthy dissent. In fact, I think the dissent is actually longer in terms of page count than the main ruling. Well, this is obviously going to go all the way up to the Supreme Court of Canada. The Supreme Court of Canada has a troubling tradition, in my view, of being legislators from the bench. And the biggest policy changes in recent Canadian history, I think, have come from that court. And I'm nervous that that court will be activist and will just go along with this because it's politically fashionable. That's just speculation on my part. But who knows? Maybe the pendulum is swinging back. If you had to look ahead at the Supreme Court of Canada case on this, what do you think how do you think they would approach it?
I have concerns about that, quite frankly. You know, I look at a comment made by former Chief Justice Beverly McLaughlin, who's no longer on the court, but I fear the sentiment is still there. And she had said in an interview when describing her job that my job is to take a step back and look at the facts and decide what's best for Canadian society, and then make a decision about that. So the Supreme Court of Canada has taken it as somewhat of a point of pride that its job is to make societal determinations rather than strict constitutional legal analyses. And that's an issue that Canadians have to be very wary of. And it's not about partisanship, because 6 of the 9 justices on the Supreme Court were appointed by Stephen Harper, yet key conservative policies have still been overturned and liberal policies have been upheld. upheld routinely over the past several years. So I'm not optimistic about the Supreme Court on the best of times, which is why the lower court rulings, I do think, are good in the way they set the stage. And the Ontario case does not yet have a decision. The Alberta case that Jason Kenney has promised to file has not yet been filed. And the Saskatchewan case, we see in the decision a little bit about how the court tends to view these things. And despite the fact that the anti-carbon tax side lost in a technical sense, what was noteworthy is how strong the dissent was. The judges who dissented, the 2 of the 5, didn't just find that the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act was unconstitutional. They found it was wholly unconstitutional. And that is a very significant determination when they laid out their rationale, because a lot of the arguments that they cited were arguments that were very fervently fought for by the Ontario government in that province's case just a few weeks ago.
That's an excerpt from the Ezra Levant show. Every day I do a video monologue and then I interview an interesting guest, and then I end by reading my hate mail. But you've got to subscribe to it, which you can do at therebel.media/shows.